how they left. They were actually staying at a place called Kirribilli House, which is the Prime Minister's residence in Sydney. And here they are leaving the wharf at Woolloomooloo on their way to the first of the celebratory events today. The couple have left the children behind, Princes William and Harry. They left them behind in Kensington and are here on what's going to be a fairly hectic schedule. No doubt that afterwards they'll be rushing back to see the children. Princess Diana there giving a chance for a bit of fashion parade, if you see what I mean. With us this morning is royal biographer Anthony Holden. Good morning.
Hi, nice
You're having
to
a
be
wonderful
here.
time. This is a nice
great.
trip for you,
Being
isn't
in
it?
London, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Prince Charles and Princess Diana, I mean, both of them have got a particular affinity with Australia, him particularly.
He has ever since he went to school here, age of 16, first time he'd left England without his parents. And his then Private Secretary David Chequers said, I took out a boy and I came home with a man. They knocked the edges off him at Timbertop, which was the country outpost of Geelong Grammar School. The first time he was called Pommy Bastard was not merely the first time anybody had called him a word like that, but it was the first time that boys his own age had treated him as one of them. And
that's what he particularly
he himself
enjoyed,
said it conquered his shyness, helped
so
him
he
grow
will
up.
be particularly pleased to
He loves
be
it.
here,
He's
won't
been
he?
back a lot since he adores the place.
And
yeah.
Princess Diana?
She has family connections. Her mother has a home here, and in fact she fled to Australia during the pursuit by press back in '81, so she knows the country quite well. Both of them, particularly Prince Charles, love the outdoors. He loves the hairy-chested aspects of Australian life, the polo, the surfing. He's not very good at it, but he does it, and all that sort of thing.
You mentioned the press there. They're going to be in a bit of a dilemma at the moment, because the real big story at the moment is not here.
Oh, you should have seen it last night. I was at the show at the Entertainment Centre, and the news actually came out in England while we were in the show. So that the snappers, as they call them, the photographers who they call their monkeys, had greeted us out of the show with this news. And they all just scattered into the night as if there was something constructive they could do, or indeed as if they knew where they were, which they didn't.
I mean, the news, of course, we're talking about is the announcement from Buckingham Palace, of course, that the Duchess of York is expecting a baby. Well, I was one of those people who also rushed round trying to grab Major Ronald Ferguson, of course, the Duchess's father. I did, in the end, manage to get an interview with him, and obviously I asked him how the Duchess was feeling.
Yes, she's absolutely very. I mean, quite contrary to press speculation, when most of the media wanted to make out that she was having a terrible problem in conceiving, and also that she was on fertility drugs to make her conceive and all that sort of rubbish. Quite contrary to all that, she is absolutely thrilled that there haven't been any problems, and touch wood, so far there are no problems. Everything is fairly normal, but that's not really for me to say. I'm just a father. I'm not going to go into those sort of details.
She's not being horribly sick or anything like that,
No,
as some of the press have said.
I don't believe that there's been any morning sickness, but I'm not altogether privy to early morning activities. I don't know how everything is fine, and she's very happy, and the Duke of York is as well.
Of course, most of the Australians are now going to be worried, having heard the news, that the Duchess of York isn't going to make her visit out.
Yes, I mean, maybe, but it was definitely put out in a statement that she was going to come to Australia, and there's no reason to suppose at this moment why she shouldn't come at all. And we must presume and hope that the birth is going to be with no problems, and therefore there's no problems. There's time enough after that to come to Australia. And I think, knowing my daughter, she will carry out her commitments.
When did she first tell you the news?
Well, perhaps put it this way, it wasn't altogether surprised when I heard the announcement yesterday.
I should hope not. And
So,
what was
in
the
other
Duchess,
words, I knew, yes.
and what was the Duchess doing herself yesterday?
I think, as I've just seen on Australian news, there was a sheet on my lawn at home saying, "Congratulations, ma'am," and the next thing was a shot of her flying over in a helicopter, which is a fairly original thing to do when you're announcing your pregnancy and then go flying in your helicopter.
I suppose it's been a subject of the family discussing things anyway, whether or not she should go on flying helicopters and doing things like that during her pregnancy. I imagine she's going to want to go on.
You're wrong. There haven't been any discussions on that. I mean, I think perhaps after this time you're beginning to know Sarah as she is, and it wouldn't be for me to say, now, do you think you ought to go skiing, or do you think you ought to fly a helicopter? She's got a lot of professional advice. She knows exactly how she feels. I'm not going to risk a blast by saying, you mustn't do this, you mustn't do that. She knows what she's doing.
A lot of people also will think that it's fairly early on in a marriage to have a baby. Is it something that she's ever told you she's always wanted to do?
Well, obviously she's certainly always wanted to have a child, yes. We haven't discussed when, ever. I don't think it is that early on, is it? I mean, we're getting on, it'll be over 2 years since the wedding, won't it, by the time he's born?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think that's getting on. I think that's about right, isn't it? About average.
Have you had words at all with the proud dad?
And, well, not since I've been out here, certainly. Well, of course I have. Before he came out, yes. And of course, he's absolutely thrilled.
And how do you feel yourself? Because it makes you a grandfather.
Well, as I said, I've already got two. They're very special to me, and I saw them yesterday. I had lunch with them here yesterday as soon as I got off the aircraft, and I'm going to see them again today and tonight. One has to say, of course, that Sarah's first child, or any child, will be slightly different to the other grandchildren for obvious reasons. As I've been quoted so frequently, I am terribly proud of Sarah. I was before she got married. I personally think she's done terribly well since her wedding, and I think that she's tried as hard as she can to be a good ambassador for the royal family and for the country. I think she feels that whilst the Duke of York is away acting as a sailor, I rephrase that, not acting as a sailor, being a genuine professional sailor, that the engagement she carries out, she is representing him.
Well, there we are, Major Ronald Ferguson talking to Anne earlier today. Major Ferguson, of course, here as Prince Charles's polo manager. Anthony Holden was watching that interview with us. Anthony, first of all, we must say it's a temporary end to the flying, all-action skiing princess, isn't it?
Very temporary, I would think. Yes, Major Ferguson was complaining a bit about the way the royal press have speculated, I guess, about how long this has taken, and they've even implied fertility drugs and things, and it was quite amusing in the light of the news that yesterday afternoon, while we were all over there watching Prince Charles hand over the Endeavour, Major Ferguson, I think was a bit jet-lagged and couldn't find his seat and wandered straight into the press enclosure, so was absolutely besieged by the travelling hacks, but didn't breathe a word, actually.
Not a hint was given.
Not a hint.
Actually, you say various lies were nailed there. One wonders how much ridicule, or how much they enjoy the ridicule of the press when the truth is finally made known, the royal family, that is.
Yes, well, I think they enjoy anything that discomforts the press. There's been quite a lot of betting, I can tell you, among the press corps on the travels around Australia here. Very firm camps as to whether Fergie was pregnant or not. Quite a lot of money's changed hands.
You scurrilous people. Now, there are people, aren't there, who would say, well, Sarah clearly loves life, she loves the husband. Wouldn't it have been wise to enjoy life before enjoying motherhood? Enjoy life a bit more for another 2 years, say 2 or 3 years before motherhood?
Well, they have done quite a lot. It's almost a couple of years since they got married, and it's quite rare by royal standards to wait that long. They obviously set themselves certain things they wanted to do. She wanted to get her wings, etc. I think it's quite in harmony with the whole kind of modern, ever more modern attitude of the royal family towards growing up.
The child, apparently, according to Major Ferguson, will be Prince or Princess, Christian name, of York.
Yes, well...
Where would they stand in the succession line?
Well, it depends on the sex of child, of course, but if it's a boy, it'll be fifth in line after Prince Charles, his two sons, and Prince Andrew, Duke of York.
But before Prince Edward?
Yes, be before Prince
Really?
Edward, I think so, yeah. I might have to check that, but I think so. So he would slip down the ladder one. I mean, my theory, of course, is that because they announced it in Australia Day, and they're going to bring it here within a month of its birth, it has to be Prince Bruce, doesn't it?
Oh,
No?
that's an
And if
interesting...
it's, yeah, well, hold on, not Prince Bruce, it's the girl.
Princess Sheila, perhaps.
Princess Sheila?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I see. Well, so, I mean, what happens now? What's the next? Do you think that they will come off the royal list, as it were, for the few months before?
I think she will. She'll, another couple of months perhaps, and then she'll gradually calm down her duties. No risks can be taken. There's no need, of course, for him to stop doing what he does, as well as continuing his naval activities.
No, in fact, Major Ferguson almost hinted that it would keep the Duchess company while he was away, still being
I
a sailor.
think she is on her own quite a lot,
Yeah.
but she's busy with her work. I guess that'll have to stop for a while as well, her
And it's
publishing
flushing
job.
news. What was the reaction amongst the press, apart from panic?
Total panic, total certitude on the part of those who'd won their bets.
I told you so.
Deep joy, because it keeps them in work for a while, yes. Another good story that will rumble along.
I bet you Princess Diana's a bit relieved.
Well, you mentioned Princess Diana. They are top billing here goes to Prince Charles and Princess Diana, if we're, of course, all happy about the Duchess of York. Let's have a look at them. We saw them leaving Kirribilli House. Let's have a look at them arriving now at Man of War Steps. We were all a bit worried, weren't we, Anne, when Princess Diana stepped onto that boat. It was a bit choppy, but all went smoothly.
Yes, Man of War Steps is the little sort of landing stage right by Sydney Opera House. And this was them going off for the first event of the day, which was really the main ceremonial event, actually on the main steps of the Opera House. And so everybody's going everywhere by water at the moment, them included, because the traffic situation is pretty impossible.
With any luck, you'll see an interesting bit of protocol fairly shortly. You would imagine, wouldn't you, that Prince Charles and Princess Diana would be first in order of precedence everywhere they went here? Actually, not true. The Governor-General, Sir Ninian Stephen, takes precedence because he is, in fact, the Queen's direct representative in Australia. After this particular sequence, they walked in line, and in fact, Prince Charles and Princess Diana were about third down the row, weren't they?
Yeah, which is quite surprising for us to witness, but I suppose when they visit a country, they're always...
Well, the Governor-General is the Queen's representative, and of course there's quite a history to it, but Prince Charles himself might have been Governor-General today had things turned out slightly different.
Yes, it's now thought amongst ordinary Australians that that would be a pretty controversial thing for him to do. Some Australians want to sort of more or less distance themselves from the royal family now. I wouldn't say sever the links, but
not sever the links. I was going to say, you'll find out shortly why Prince Charles has never been more popular. He made a speech today at that Opera House ceremony, which was one of the warmest speeches I would imagine Australia has ever received.
He went to a great deal of trouble to talk about himself, and he said, my wife and I, about 6 times during the speech, so he obviously felt that he wanted to say how warmly he felt for Australia. We're going to be talking about lots of more things as well during the programme today, particularly looking again at the First Fleet's arrival, looking at the parade of tall ships in Sydney Harbour, which is going to be simply magnificent.
Fly past, fireworks.
Yes, there were daytime fireworks earlier on, and we'll show you some of that. There's going to be skywriting and...
and you're still saddled with us.
Yes, so join us again in a few minutes.
Thank you both. What a start. My word, what a coup. An interview with Major Ronald Ferguson. The betting's already started on names. It's 3-1 George, that's the boys' favourite. 3-1 Elizabeth, the girls' favourite. 7:27 is the time. Gary Champion has joined us with news of today's racing, Gary.
Yes, indeed. Just a word, in fact, that because of the overnight rain, there's been heavy rain, of course, and that means that both meetings at Nottingham and Chepstow have had to be abandoned today. So I'm afraid there's no horse tip. However, the greyhounds still run, and Mike Palmer's greyhound tip this morning is Wait on Me, and that goes from Trap 5 in the 8:18 at Walthamstow tonight. That's Wait on Me, Trap 5, 8:18 at Walthamstow tonight.
Gary, thank you. Coming up, the news with Gordon and Sam Hall, of course. We're going back to Australia after 7:30. Right now, the weather from Anna Walker.
Thanks, Richard. Well, those of you who like racing will be pleased to know it'll be a bit drier today. If we start up with Scotland, that's actually divided completely. Over on the west side of Scotland, it'll be fairly dry and pretty sunny throughout the day. Quite a reward for all the wet weather you've been having. And over on the east side, there will be some showers which will fall as sleet or snow up on the higher ground. Moving south, there'll be outbreaks of rain, much lighter than they were yesterday, throughout northern England, moving down to, well, in the Midlands there won't be quite so much rain. There'll be a lot of mist around this morning, and over on East Anglia, fairly wet as well. Sunny in southwest Wales and southwest England. A few showers up in Northern Ireland. Moving on to this afternoon, the day is going to get drier with lots more sun over in Wales, southwest England and the west of Scotland. Still some scattered showers up on the hills in Scotland, but otherwise fairly dry. Moving on quickly to tonight, you can see there's going to be a widespread frost and some fog around. Now back to Richard.
Anna, thank you. Stay with us. We're celebrating with a party in Australia. Australia's bicentennial, of course, 200 years old today, and that's where we're going next after the latest national and international news from Sam Hall in Washington and Gordon Honeycomb here in London. Gordon.
Hello, good morning. Australians are marking 200 years of European settlement today. The National Party began with the arrival yesterday of the Prince and Princess of Wales. The nation's eyes today are on Sydney Harbour, from where Martin Frizzell now reports.
News of the royal pregnancy was the icing on the cake for many Aussies celebrating their biggest day for 2 centuries.
The Duke and Duchess of York had planned to visit Australia in the autumn. Officials here say that tour is still going ahead, and it's likely the new baby will come too.
The uncle and aunt-to-be were guests of honour at the small cove beside the Opera House as the ships of the First Fleet reenacted Governor Phillip's arrival in 1788. Thousands of little craft crowded into the harbour. Overhead, the Australian Air Force joined the party. The alternative bash was on a nearby headland where more than 1,000 Aborigines and their supporters demanded the return of their land rights. The Prince was careful to refer to the celebrations of modern Australia. He also spoke of his early schoolboy trips down under.
While I was here, I had the pommy bits bashed off me.
This was the focal point for the bicentennial year. The only problem the Australians have over the next 11 months is how do they top it? Martin Frizzell, TVAM, Sydney.
And we're in Sydney, Australia for Australia Day, and it's a very, very beautiful day to celebrate. If you have a look at the harbour behind us, you'll be able to see that we're not the only ones celebrating. In fact, I think everybody who's anybody in Australia is celebrating. Look, there's a particularly well-known airship. In fact, there are two airships over Sydney Harbour at the moment. There's another one over the bridge, over Mike's shoulder, which is, and that's the air, that's busy in the air, but on the ocean, things are even busier.
Actually, just to complete the thing about the air, I heard an officer talking earlier on in the day. He said, there are 13 helicopters in the air at the moment. We have reached air saturation.
Yeah, it's a bit dangerous, really, isn't it? We've got the Opera House between us. Nice to have a bit of culture coming between us.
Yeah, culture has always come between us, hasn't it?
But if you just look at the harbour, you'll be able to see that the shipping lanes are extremely busy at the moment. I'm not sure that I would want to navigate them, but I can't blame anyone who's got a boat taking it out today. It just looks gorgeous, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you've got a national holiday, go out on a boat.
Yeah, you can see a number of the tall ships there as well, just in the background, because we're going to get ready quite soon for the parade of tall ships, which we'll be bringing you.
Right, now let's tell viewers where we are, shall we? I think we can get a geographic view. There we are.
I brought my tent. Little tent again.
Yeah.
The sun is very hot at the moment. We don't want to get sunstroke.
Yeah. I like to leave the flaps open.
But we are literally halfway down Taronga Zoo, which again, where we were just a bit lower than where we were yesterday, but still overlooking the harbour. We've got a view that's probably worth an awful lot of money today. Anyway, let's move on, because this day all started really 200 years ago, didn't it? And let me introduce to you a man called Nick Vine Hall, who's a historian, a sort of family historian. Been looking, and it's a particularly wonderful day for you because you're looking particularly at the history of everybody in Australia at the moment.
We are, all 15 million of us.
It started, strangely, with that first fleet of ships. People who were settlers and convicts. And people in Australia are now proud of being descended from those.
Oh yes, they wear it like a proud badge on their sleeve. One in 50 problems.
Melbourne's celebrations were also targeted by Aboriginal protesters today. They staged a noisy demonstration at the city square, disrupting the flag-raising ceremony.
Today's ceremony attracted a large crowd, just what the demonstrators wanted. As all eyes were on the Army flag bearers and Melbourne Lord Mayor Councillor Lecky Ord, the Aborigines and their supporters moved into position. They waited until the flag raising was underway before voicing their anger. After that, they marched down Swanston Street to the amazement of people waiting to see the Australia Day parade. Then across Queen Victoria Gardens and onto King's Domain, where organisers claimed the protest had been a success.
That would have woken them up. That would have brought them to an awareness of Aboriginal people are still here. They would have been starting to think, gee, what have we done to them people?
Although the Aborigines haven't ruled out further demonstrations here, they say their efforts will now be concentrated in Sydney.
But elsewhere across the state and the nation, Australia Day has gone smoothly. From Perth to Hobart, people turned out in their tens of thousands to watch and take part. In Melbourne, our party got off to an early start and the pace increased throughout the day.
The smell of freshly cooked bacon and eggs tempted more than 4,000 people from their beds at 7 a.m. to kick off Melbourne's bicentennial festivities. People came from all over to gather under the shadow of 4 giant hot air balloons in the state's largest free public breakfast.
The good time continued at Melbourne's Town Hall, with 200 children, all born on this day, all under 12 years old.
Everybody should celebrate Australia's birthday. Happy birthday, dear Australia. Happy birthday to you.
Then the party moved to the city streets, with hundreds of people taking part in the Australia Day parade. The spectacle moved right through the heart of Melbourne before finishing up near the Queen Victoria Gardens.
A much longer journey faces the crew of this Cobb & Co coach, which left Melbourne today for a 6-month journey to Cairns, raising money for cancer research on the way.
Bail up, Melbourne, bail up!
And Ned Kelly was there to bid them a noisy but friendly farewell. And at the Alexandra Gardens, the celebration was in full swing.
Happy birthday, Australia!
Conservation, Forests and Lands Minister Joan Kerner was on hand to cut the first slice of 2 large creamy birthday cakes, which were later divided into 1,000 slices and gobbled up in seconds.
And to ensure the celebrations went off with a bang, the 2nd 15th Field Regiment fired a 21-gun salute on the banks of the Yarra.
Have you noticed something happening? Something's going on around here. Have you noticed there's a feeling of something in the air? Celebration of the nation. Give us a hand. Celebration of the nation. Let's make it grand. Let's live ahead. Show.
And we're in Sydney, Australia for Australia Day, and it's a very, very beautiful day to celebrate. If you have a look at the harbour behind us, you'll be able to see that we're not the only ones celebrating. In fact, I think everybody who's anybody in Australia is celebrating. Look, there's a particularly well-known airship. In fact, there are 2 airships over Sydney Harbour at the moment. There's another one over the bridge, over Mike's shoulder, which is, and that's the air, that's busy in the air, but on the ocean, things are even busier.
Actually, just to complete the thing about the air, I heard an officer talking earlier on in the day. He said, there are 13 helicopters in the air at the moment. We have reached air saturation.
Yeah, it's a bit dangerous, really, isn't it? We've got the Opera House between us. Nice to have a bit of culture coming between us.
Culture has always come between us, hasn't it?
But if you just look at the harbour, you'll be able to see that the shipping lanes are extremely busy at the moment. I'm not sure that I would want to navigate them, but I can't blame anyone who's got a boat taking it out today. It just looks gorgeous, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you've got a national holiday, go out on a boat.
Yeah, you can see a number of the tall ships there as well, just in the background, because we're going to get ready quite soon for the parade of tall ships, which we'll be bringing you.
Right, now let's tell viewers where we are, shall we? I think we can get a geographic view. There we are. I brought my
tent. Little tent again.
Yeah.
The sun is very hot at the moment. We don't want to get sunstroke.
Yes. I like to leave the flaps open.
But we are literally halfway down Taronga Zoo, which again, where we were just a bit lower than where we were yesterday, but still overlooking the harbour. We've got a view that's probably worth an awful lot of money today. Anyway, let's move on, because this day all started really 200 years ago, didn't it? And let me introduce to you a man called Nick Vine Hall, who's a historian, a sort of family historian. Been looking, and it's a particularly wonderful day for you because you're looking particularly at the history of everybody in Australia at the moment.
We are, all 15 million of us.
It started, strangely, with that first fleet of ships, with people who were settlers and convicts. And people in Australia are now proud of being descended from those.
Oh yes, they wear it like a proud badge on their sleeve. One in 15 people, or 1 million Australians, are estimated to have convict ancestry within the last 9 generations born in this country. And that makes them feel proud, not because of what the convict did, but because it links them to the pioneering era of what founded Australia.
Yes, I mean, if you look at the first fleet arriving this morning, if you can pick out their ships there from the massive ships in the harbour, you actually get some idea of just how brave those men were in the first fleet.
Oh yes, and in the 1830s, when they were coming out and sailing ships in large numbers, it was not unknown for 50 ships a year to disappear without a trace in storms and hitting reefs. So it was you bid your family farewell, and you didn't really ever expect to see them again.
But there were women on those ships. Who were they? What sort of women came out to Australia in those days?
Well, about 20% of the convicts, the 780 convicts, were women. They were generally women in their early 20s, and they were mainly convicted of crimes against property. Stealing, yes, I'm sorry. And mainly in the Middlesex, Kent and Devon regions of England. That seems to be where the pressure of the social pressure caused them to steal things.
In fact, most of the convicts who came out here, were they found guilty of petty sort of crimes, or were they murderers and bandits?
Well, they're a bit of a mixed lot. But crimes against property, stealing things, were viewed much more seriously then. If you relieved a pompous dandy in Piccadilly of his silk handkerchief, you would have got 14 years in Botany Bay. Whereas for murder, you would have got the same.
Oh, I see. In fact, it was said, wasn't it, in London at that time, that if you were living in appalling conditions and you actually fancied a try at living in Australia, you could almost affect the exact crime to commit in order to get yourself shipped out here.
Yes, and then if you liked it, you write back and tell your wife, and she'd commit another crime, and she could come out and join you.
Did that really happen?
Of course.
Gosh. And what was it like when they arrived?
Well, it was...
How hard was life?
They brought with them all the equipment and things that they would need, because they had nothing here to they couldn't go down to the corner store and buy, you know, another pack of cheese.
There weren't even the animals to kill that they were familiar with.
No, they bought 50,000 bricks and 8,000 fish hooks and 260 pairs of women's stockings and so on. All the things that
they bring.
They bought a piano and 8 bulls and 3 calves, and you know the list is endless.
Kitchen sink,
Australia's
literally.
first ever picnic.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? The people who must have done that. And Australians now are extremely proud, as I said, of being descended from a convict, but it wasn't always that way, was it?
No, it's only the last 15 years that we've started to come to terms with our penal past. But I think what has happened is a realisation and this emerging sense of Australians' national identity that the convict symbolises, the convict era, whether it's the bushranger or the first white baby carried over, you know, the Blue Mountains. Being related to such a person symbolises that you are Australian and belong to that era, and that's what we're all celebrating today and rattling a few skeletons in the process.
Well, Nick Van Hall, stay with us, because in a few minutes we're going to meet a couple who are descended from First Fleeters. Be with us in a couple of minutes.
Sneak shot of the Sea Princess, otherwise known as the Love Boat. That's where it was shot, the series The Love Boat, on that boat you just saw. Just to remind you also, it's Australia Day we're celebrating, also my daughter Sarah's 11th birthday. Congratulations then to 15,000,001. Let's concentrate now on the somewhat larger birthday event, Australia Day. Every single perch round the Sydney Harbour has been taken, and Paul Reiser, our reporter Paul, has been out and about seeing what they think of it all. Let's find out what he discovered. Good idea.
Well, thank you very much. As you can see down here on the harbour side, every possible vantage point taken up. What time did you get up this morning, madam?
5:15.
And how does it feel to be an Australian this morning?
Oh, I've been an Australian for probably 15 years now, and I'm the proudest moment of my life, I think.
What about this scene?
Oh, I can't believe it. I'm just waiting for the first fleet to come in. I believe there's thousands of spectator craft out there, and I can just picture my ancestor coming in on the first fleet. My husband's a 7th generation Australian now, so it'd be fantastic.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
How do you feel about this bicentennial?
Oh, I feel fantastic. It's a great scene, a great environment, and really feel a buzz in the air.
Had a bit of a bun fight for a place here.
Certainly have. And getting here in the traffic was not an easy matter.
What time did you get up this morning?
Oh, we didn't get up till about 7 o'clock. We had a late night last night. We're out celebrating.
Well done. Thank you very much. Sir, how do you feel about this bicentennial this morning?
Oh, I think it's great. Really terrific. Fantastic day for this. Terrific scenery. Beautiful looking city. It's great.
I think half of Sydney's out here.
I think so, yeah. The other half will be watching it on TV, I think.
Let's just have a word down here. What about this lady? Madam, are you enjoying yourself in the sunshine?
Wonderful. Love the sun. It's beautiful.
What time did you get up today?
4 o'clock this morning.
That's very early.
I'm from the south, and we've travelled all the way through.
And how late are you staying?
Till it finishes, so we don't expect to get home till about 11.
Couldn't you have stayed at home and watched it in the garden with the Barbie on the telly?
No, it's not the same. You've got to get in with the spirit of it.
Well, here we are, in with the spirit of it, overlooking Sydney Harbour, back to Anne and Mike.
Ah, thank you, Paul. What an outrageous suggestion, watch it on television.
Yeah, dreadful.
You'd never do a thing like that, would you? Oh, you see what I mean? Right, let me introduce you now to two people who have got a direct involvement, if you like, in the day's happenings. I'm talking about First Fleet Fellows, we should call them, Suzanne Stanton and Roy Williams. Good morning to both of you. Now, both of you have direct descendants from that First Fleet. Suzanne, you've found 5, haven't you?
That's right. I have Thomas Undell, who was a doctor, Owen Kavanagh, who was a seaman, and 3 convicts, Darnell, Anne Forbes, and William Dring.
Your word perfect on those. Why did you start the search for an ancestry well, I suppose some people might be just a tiny bit ashamed of?
It's not really something that's ashamed of in Australia nowadays. Everyone wants a convict. and I got the bug through an
If you haven't got
aunt.
a comfort, you go and find one, do you?
That's right, or you pay Nick to find you one.
Yeah. So what about the convicts you found? Did you find out what their offences were for?
Yes, they were all convicted of stealing. Very small things. Anne Forbes, for example, stole 10 yards of printed cotton cloth, and she was sentenced to death at the age of 16, and then that was later repealed and she was transported to the colonies.
It's astonishing when you look back, Suzanne, at the harshness of life on the First Fleet, the conditions under which those people were in, and the thought that one of your ancestors, for a minor petty theft, you get fined, what, 20 Australian dollars now for that?
That'd be about right.
Yeah. Now, before you married Roy Williams here, not you, Roy, had also been indulging in your own researches, hadn't you?
That's right, quite independently of Suzanne. It all started out, my brother came home from school one day and said he had to do a family tree for a school project, and my father and I decided to help him, and in the end we became quite obsessed with the whole task, and we unearthed an old family Bible of my grandmother's, which showed us that we went back to the First Fleet. And
Who was your ancestor on the First Fleet?
I had two. One was a seaman, William Nash was his name, and the other was a woman named Maria Haynes, who came out on the same ship as Nash. The records aren't quite clear as to whether she was a convict or a seaman's wife. We think she was a convict because she ended up marrying William Nash soon after they arrived in Sydney. It was one of the first marriages in the new colony.
Was it, because of all those connections, a special moment when you first saw the First Fleet coming into the harbour today?
Oh, it was superb. I got a great buzz out of it, pride and excitement, and very hard to describe the emotion, really.
And Suzanne, there's one thing that links a lot of you together, and that is that you all stop your researches with that First Fleet. You don't go back and delve into, say, England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland.
No,
Why is
you're
that?
right. Because when the First Fleet came to Australia, it was a major break with the old country and the old world. And so I think Australians are happy when they get to the beginning of their world. And also, it would be very difficult to go back into the English records.
Now, Nick Vine-Hall, who's also our guest this morning, a historian, is shaking his head violently at that. You obviously reckon that it's worth delving past the First Fleet and seeing what sort of families these people came from actually in Britain.
Oh yes, whilst I appreciate what Susan says, it is usually very easy to trace back where you came from in Ireland, or the parish in Worcestershire or Scotland. And so many records are available on microfilms and computers now that you only need to wonder about it, and it's there to be discovered. And
it certainly is fascinating, isn't it? It must really be like getting to know people you've never met.
That's right.
I wonder what your feelings are. Prince Charles and Princess Di are here. There are voices, and we've heard them, voices of dissent saying, you know, why are they here? This is Australia's day. Do you go along with that?
No, I don't go along with that. I think that British royalty has always been a part of Australian history, and it's quite right and proper that they be here. I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool royalist by any means, but I certainly don't resent their presence at all. They add a lot of colour and interest.
It's encouraging to hear that. The good news, Suzanne Stanton and Roy Williams, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And shortly after the break we're about to take, we're going to hear from Prince Charles himself.
Yes, he made a wonderful speech just a bit earlier. We'll be playing you some of that in a couple of moments.
What a beautiful sight, isn't it? Just thinking, you know, 200 years isn't a very long time at all, is it? The death sentence for stealing 10 yards of cotton. And incidentally, if you were with us a little bit earlier in this half hour, well, that's the joys of live television, of modern technology. Just for a moment, we were watching via satellite Channel 7's news output from Melbourne. I wonder what they were watching. 7:57 is the time. Back to Australia, of course, shortly. We've got the news coming up with Gordon. Right now, let's check out the weather here in Britain with Anna Walker.
Thank you, Richard. Well, there's a taste of Australia over on the west coast of Britain this morning, where you had all the wet weather yesterday, particularly up in Scotland. It's now going to be dry and sunny for most of the day, a few light showers. Over on the east coast of Scotland, though, a bit of a different story. There's some sleet or snow falling up on the higher ground, otherwise some fairly heavy showers still over on the north-east coast of Scotland. Moving south, there'll be some outbreaks of rain, but not nearly as heavy as they were yesterday, throughout the north of England and moving down to central and southern England as well. Over on the southwest corner and in southwest Wales, there'll be lots of sun around today. Over in Northern Ireland, though, pretty wet, some outbreaks of rain there. Moving on to this afternoon, the mist should clear from central and southern England, leaving it pretty cloudy but still quite warm, about 7 or 8 degrees. The best of the sun, though, is still in Wales and the southwest corner of England. The western coast of Scotland, that's the word I was looking for. The west coast of Scotland will remain sunny this afternoon and fairly dry, especially in the sheltered areas. You should be able to get quite a tan there. The winds really are not a problem today, only around 15 or 20 miles an hour. Moving on quickly to tonight, it's going to get colder. There'll be a widespread frost and a lot of fog around in the central and southern area of the country. Fairly cloudy, but pretty dry throughout the day. That's all from me. Back to Richard.
Hannah, thank you. If you've just joined us, a very good morning to you. If you're wondering what's going on this morning here at TVAM, well, we're enjoying a party in Australia, 200 years, the bicentennial birthday party, and that's where we're going after the latest national and international news from Sam Hall in Washington and Gordon Honeycomb in London. Gordon. Well, the climax of those bicentennial celebrations, 200 years Australia has been formed now. Anne Diamond and Mike Morris are sitting overlooking Sydney Harbour. Let's go back and rejoin them.
Hello again and welcome to Sydney Harbour in Australia, where we're celebrating Australia Day. It looks wonderful, doesn't it? Somewhere over in that coastline behind me, on the other side of the harbour, Princess Diana and Prince Charles are enjoying the festivities. In fact, Prince Charles made a speech a bit earlier on today, a speech in which he particularly emphasised his and Princess Diana's love for this country.
Regular visitors from an old country to help you decide whether you should be celebrating or not. My wife and I will be glad to be of assistance. We are both very happy to have been invited to the party. When Captain Cook discovered this part of the great Southland and claimed it for the British Crown, he was sailing in quest of knowledge. And whatever is said about the founding of the British Empire, the astonishing courage and resolve of many people like Captain Cook, who dramatically advanced the sum of human knowledge in their quest for discovery and trade, should not be ignored amidst the less worthy aspects of the story. But as still happens today, when knowledge is invariably examined for its less exalted applications, King George III's ministers fairly soon saw the practical possibilities of a place where inconvenient people could be transported and forgotten. There is no point now in trying to gloss over the circumstances in which the country of which you are rightly proud began. Indeed, to face those facts is a necessary part of realizing just how proud you should be. For the sad truth is that in those early days of the colony, nobody was free. The men who guarded the convicts were in prison along with them. They were all a long way from home, and they all, no doubt, thought that Australia was the worst place in the world. But the best part about the story is that they made their prison into a new home, where freedom became not just the dream of those in shackles, but a reality for everybody. It didn't happen by accident. It took the intelligence and courage of brave men and women. Even within the astonishingly brief span which covers the whole history of modern Australia, the process of making liberty an institution took time. For the original people of this land, it must all have seemed very different. And if they should say that their predicament has not yet ended, it would be hard to know how to answer, beyond suggesting that a country free enough to examine its own conscience is a land worth living in, a nation to be envied. Anyway, most people who live here now seem to think Australia is the best place in the world, and the rest of the world finds it difficult to argue.
Prince Charles, you'll hear more from Prince Charles a bit later on. You've got a celebratory note at the end of that speech, and he's in a really warm mood as we give you a little bit more of his speech, as I say, later on. Now, as I mentioned the word celebration, well, the whole nation naturally is celebrating, and encouraging them to do that, amongst others, the television chiefs of this world. Let's see, shall we, celebration of a nation.
Have you noticed something happening, something going on around here? Have you noticed there's a feeling of something in the air? Celebration of the nation. Give us a hand. Celebration of the nation. Let's make it grand. Let's lend a hand and show the world how brave we ought to be. All our tears of sweat and tears, it's our ice and tambourine. Celebration of the nation. Give us a hand. Of the nation. Let's make it grand. Let's make it great. 88. Come on, give us a hand.
Beautiful.
Happy lot, aren't they? You see why they call us whinging poms.
Oh, not anymore. We're not whinging today anyway. We've got plenty to celebrate too. A bit later on in the programme, we're going to be bringing you more of Prince Charles's speech. Also, a bit of the speech from Bob Hawke, the Prime Minister here. We'll be looking at the
Fireworks?
daytime fireworks, yes.
The fly past.
The fly past, big military fly past.
Major Ronald Ferguson.
Talking about the Duchess of York's expected baby. That's all coming up right now. Let's get back to London.
Just moved in next door. Could I borrow a Diet Pepsi?
Sure.
Yes.
Be right with you. When you go all out for taste, go for the only Diet Cola with 100% NutraSweet and no saccharin.
You okay in there?
Here's your Diet Pepsi.
Thanks. I hope it wasn't too much trouble.
No trouble at all. Diet Pepsi, the only Diet Cola with no saccharin.
Hello.
What's known as the
Good
Dawn
morning.
Chorus.
Yes, it's Australia Day. It's the 200th birthday of a nation, and we are here in Sydney Harbour, Australia, celebrating with this particular nation, and it's a wonderful day.
It's a wonderful day. It's also been described as the biggest picnic on earth. If you look round us, you'd see why. And let's show you some of the things that this vast crowd lining the harbour have been watching. There was an enormous fly-past earlier on in the day. You'll see there Sea King helicopters, Chinook helicopters, reflecting the strength of the Australian Air Force, flying over the canopy, isn't it?
Exactly. I was just going to say, you were watching it through the canopy that they've erected on the steps of the Sydney Opera House to protect the visiting dignitaries from the very harsh sunshine today.
They paraded most types of plane right through from troop carriers, troop ships to, I should say, troop planes, right through to F-111 jets and Mirage jets. So I certainly saw hundreds of flags flying, very patriotic.
Yeah, but there were also little flags coming out. It was a sort of daytime fireworks celebration, and if you look at these little black spots coming down from the sky, as that little girl's doing, her mum is explaining to her that actually it's not little black blobs falling in the sky, they're little parachutes that start off, and as they descend, rice paper flags come fluttering out. It's very difficult to see, but it was a wonderful sight, actually, to watch over the harbour there. And there's more of those daytime fireworks, looking like cannon fire there.
Yes, it was the sort of event that when it started, actually, you thought, well, that's not up to much, and then as it progressed, you thought, well, that's great.
It was strange. At about 5 o'clock this morning, families were walking all in one direction through the streets of Sydney, making their way to the coastline, because they were wanting to come and literally witness this for themselves. And everybody who is anybody seems to be here. There you can see, even better there, the rice paper flags descending, Australian flags. coming down from the sky.
What we should mention, actually...
There, brilliant one
there we
there.
go. Oh, there we
Princess
are.
Diana enjoying that one.
By the way, we've been having a long debate. What colour do we call Princess Diana's outfit, Anne? Mint green. How about that? What you see there, actually, is the part of the Customs Guard duty outside the Opera House. In fact, there were uniforms of all the ages of the Australian Army, Navy and Air Force on display for the royal couple.
Yes. Down there in the harbours earlier today, there are so many ships there that people locally were complaining they couldn't get to sleep all night because all the ships were hooting at each other.
It's been a lovely show for Prince Charles, amongst others, hasn't it?
Well, the royal couple, I think, have been enjoying themselves. In fact, nobody could really escape from enjoying themselves today. But Prince Charles, it really means something to him because he's been here many times before. He has a particular affection for the country. And in the speech he made a bit earlier today, he made a special point of saying how much he loved the country and why. Because he'd started here so long ago, more or less in his school days. It was lovely to hear him referring to so warmly, and it wasn't a formal speech. It was a very natural speech.
I think what interests me when you listen to Prince Charles's speech, he almost indicates that they were very near the happiest days of his life, the school days in Australia.
He actually said so, I think.
Yeah.
But let's have a look now and see what he did say in his speech earlier on today.
So long ago, many of you may not realize that part of my own education took place here in Australia. Quite frankly, it was by far the best part, and something which I shall always cherish. It gave me an insight into the character of this country and the individuals who have shaped it by the force of their personalities and by their infectious good humor. While I was here, I had the pommy bits bashed off me, like chips off an old block, and the results are only too obvious. I keep coming back for more, and it is always a special pleasure. But my wife and I are particularly glad to be here this year, on this great day, to help you, as if the Aussies needed help in anything, to celebrate your good fortune and to wish you well for a future that holds out such great promise.
Well, watching that with us was royal biographer Anthony Holden, and the affection was loud and clear throughout Prince Charles's speech, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. He went back specifically to his days here at Timbertop, the outpost of Geelong Grammar School, which is called the Eton of Australia. And he was only 16 when he came out to Timbertop with David Checketts, who was then Prince Philip's equerry, but later became Charles's private secretary. It was a very important time in his life. He grew up during that period.
We say important. We've mentioned his affection. Could he, should he, do you think, of any stage of being Governor-General of Australia? It was mooted, wasn't it?
It was mooted. I know he very much wanted to. I've had very interesting conversations with him about it. The problem really was that in 1975, the then Governor-General Sir John Kerr exercised the royal prerogative and dismissed, very controversially, dismissed the government of Gough Whitlam. Yeah. And it brought the whole thing much too close to politics, party politics, for princely comfort, really. It's a great shame because it would have been a terrific consolation to Prince Charles for his long wait for the throne, which is one of the main problems of his life back in England. He loves this country, and it would have been a quasi-monarchical role. It would have been a good apprenticeship.
It would also be a bit controversial now, wouldn't it, for other reasons, in that some ordinary Australians, while they love the royal family and they respect them, let's say, would actually like to see Australia divorcing itself more from Britain.
I think that's truer than people back in England realise, yes. When I came here with Prince Charles in '81, just before his wedding, it was quite clear going around with him then, it was a live issue, the Governor-Generalship then, Prime Minister Fraser was very keen on it, that in some ways it might have been equally logical to have King Constantine of Greece as Governor-General of Australia, because there's a huge Greek population. They call it the biggest Greek island. You have this massive immigrant influx, Malaysians,
More Greeks here than
Koreans.
Athens. Oh, no, Athens is the only other
biggest,
person.
yes, after New York. New York is the other great big Greek city.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. But, you know, the Lebanese, Koreans, Malaysians, Vietnamese, Chinese you've got here, Hong Kongese, they know nothing about the British royal
It's
family.
interesting you're talking about immigrants there, because Prince Charles alluded to the Aborigines in this speech. Of course, the Aborigines have become a very controversial issue here for the Prime Minister.
That's absolutely right, and Prime Minister Bob Hawke actually spoke just before Prince Charles, and really everybody here was perched on their seats waiting to see whether he would address that Aborigine question.
Some critics will say he...
The answer, frankly, as I think you'll see very shortly, is no. He glanced at it very briefly. Let's see what Mr. Bob Hawke had to say to Sydney and the nation today.
Who is an Australian? And that factor is a commitment to Australia and to its future. It is that common commitment which binds the Australian born of the 7th or 8th generation and all those of their fellow Australians born in any of the 130 countries from which our people are drawn. In Australia, there is no hierarchy of descent. There must be no privilege of origin. The commitment is all. The commitment to Australia is the one thing needful to be a true Australian.
And that's the Prime Minister of Australia there, Bob Hawke. Of course, there's other big royal news today, isn't there?
Very big royal news.
Buckingham Palace, of course, announced that the Duchess of York is expecting a baby. Australians are expecting the Duke and Duchess of York to come and visit them in the autumn. Is that visit still on now that Fergie, or the Duchess of York, will have had her baby some 4 weeks only?
It's all about expectation at the moment, isn't it? In
Well,
everything.
Major Ronald Ferguson, who's the Duchess of York's father, of course, is also Prince Charles's polo manager and is out here in that role. And we interviewed him. We'll be showing you that interview in a couple of minutes.
You know, back home we'd have to make our own entertainment. Long evenings, standing round the piano, wishing someone could play it. Still, we'd always end up running through some old favourites. Music to the taste buds. Know any Rolf Harris, mate?
No, sorry, Gub.
Looks like we're in for a good evening then.
Happy 200th birthday to the folks down under.
Hello again. The tall ships, as you saw there, are starting their parade out of Sydney Harbour. We'll be having a look at that in a few minutes when they all are resplendent in full sail. Right now, of course, the big news is Australia Day, naturally, but equally big at the moment, in fact, Channel 9 were leading on it in their news bulletin last night, is the fact that the Duchess of York is expecting a baby. It's wonderful news. I mean, everyone loves a baby, don't they? She and her husband are expected to do a tour of Australia in the autumn, and it has been announced that she will be doing that tour. Well, Major Ronald Ferguson, her father, is in Australia at the moment. He's Prince Charles's polo manager, and I managed to catch up with him earlier today and ask him how he reacted to the news. Have a look at what he said.
Yes, she's absolutely thrilled. I mean, quite contrary to press speculation, when most of the media wanted to make out that she was having a terrible problem in conceiving, and also that she was on fertility drugs to make her conceive and all that sort of rubbish. Quite contrary to all that, she is absolutely thrilled that there haven't been any problems, and touch wood, so far there are no problems. Everything is fairly normal. But that's not really for me to say. I'm just a father. I'm not going to go into those sort of details.
She's not being horribly sick or anything like that, as some of the
no,
press have said.
I don't believe that there's been any morning sickness, but I'm not altogether privy to early morning activities. I don't know how. Everything is fine, and she's very happy. And the Duke of York is as well.
Of course, most of the Australians are now going to be worried, having heard the news, that the Duchess of York isn't going to make her visit out.
Yes, I mean, maybe, but it was definitely put out in a statement that she was going to come to Australia, and there's no reason to suppose at this moment why she shouldn't come at all. And we must presume and hope that the birth is going to be with no problems, and therefore there's no problems. There's time enough after that to come to Australia. And I think, knowing my daughter, she will carry out her commitments.
When did she first tell you the news?
Well, perhaps put it this way, it wasn't altogether surprised when I heard the announcement yesterday.
I should hope not. And
So,
what was the
in other
Duchess,
words, I knew, yes.
and what was the Duchess doing herself yesterday?
I think, as I've just seen on Australian news, there was a sheet on my lawn at home saying, "Congratulations, ma'am," and the next thing was a shot of her flying over in a helicopter, which is a fairly original thing to do when you announce your pregnancy and then go flying in your helicopter.
I suppose it's been a subject of the family discussing things anyway, whether or not she should go on flying helicopters and doing things like that during her pregnancy. I imagine she's going to want to go on.
You're wrong. There haven't been any discussions on that. I mean, I think perhaps after this time you're beginning to know Sarah as she is, and it wouldn't be for me to say, now, do you think you ought to go skiing, or do you think you want to fly a helicopter? She's got a lot of professional advice. She knows exactly how she feels. And I'm not going to risk her a blast by saying you mustn't do this and you mustn't do that. She knows what she's doing.
A lot of people also will think that it's fairly early on in a marriage to have a baby. Is it something that she's ever told you she's always wanted to do?
Well, obviously she's certainly always wanted to have a child, yes. We haven't discussed when, ever. I don't think it is that early on, is it? I mean, we're getting on, it'll be over 2 years since the wedding, won't it, by the time he's born?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think that's getting on. I think that's about right, isn't it? About average.
Have you had words at all with the proud dad?
Well, not since I've been out here, certainly. Well, of course I have. Before he came out, yes. And of course, he's absolutely thrilled.
And how do you feel yourself? Because it makes you a grandfather.
Well, as I said, I've already got two. They're very special to me, and I saw them yesterday. I had lunch with them here yesterday as soon as I got off the aircraft, and I'm going to see them again today and tonight. One has to say, of course, that Sarah's first child, or any child, will be slightly different to the other grandchildren for obvious reasons. As I've been quoted so frequently, I'm terribly proud of Sarah.
Well, royal biographer Anthony Holt is with us this morning. That really puts the end to the press speculation, doesn't it?
Yes, this was total mayhem among the royal hacks last night because we were all in the rather wonderful bicentennial entertainment, the writers anyway, and the snappers as they call them, or the monkeys, were outside, and they heard this news, greeted us with it when we came out, and they just scattered off into the darkened Sydney streets to file their stories.
Major Ferguson said to me that the only way he can get over the jet lag, and of course they'd only just arrived, is by taking a sleeping pill and going to bed. And he took the sleeping pill, and the next thing he knew was James Whittaker from the Daily Mirror beating on his hotel door.
He's a very conscientious journalist, is James. I must say, I think he'd written the story before he left home, but he just wanted to top up a few fresh paragraphs there.
Of course, I mean, all the press love a story, all the people love a baby, don't they? And, I mean, everyone's going to be thrilled. I can imagine that Princess Diana will be rather relieved. At last the heat will be taken off her children.
Yes, I mean, that, alas, the hacks will be looking at her tum, signs of swelling next, because Fergie will be a running story for a while, but they need something new. I guess that's the next one they'll go for.
Yes. And are you surprised to learn that the Duke and Duchess of York are not going to put off their Australian visit? They're going to come with a 4-week-old baby?
It's in the spirit of the times. Charles and Diana brought Prince William here in '83, which was the first time that had ever been done. It proved mixed, but he was just beginning to crawl, and I think when a baby's that small, you would know better than me. It's very hard to part from its mother, and it's in the spirit of making the monarchy look more modern all the time.
She's a bit of a pioneer, the Duchess of York, isn't she?
Yeah, and there are lots of bets around here that they'll have to call it Prince Bruce, because make it very appropriate, announcing it on Australia Day.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Anthony. We'll take a short break. Be back with you in a couple of moments with more from Sydney.
News of the royal pregnancy was the icing on the cake for many Aussies celebrating their biggest day for 2 centuries.
The Duke and Duchess of York had planned to visit Australia in the autumn. Officials here say that tour is still going ahead, and it's likely the new baby will come too.
The uncle and aunt-to-be were guests of honour at the small cove beside the Opera House as the ships of the First Fleet reenacted Governor Phillip's arrival in 1788. Thousands of little craft crowded into the harbour. Overhead, the Australian Air Force joined the party. The alternative bash was on a nearby headland where more than 1,000 Aborigines and their supporters demanded the return of their land rights. The Prince was careful to refer to the celebrations of modern Australia. He also spoke of his early schoolboy trips down under.
While I was here, I had the pommy bits bashed off me.
This was the focal point for the bicentennial year. The only problem the Australians have over the next 11 months is how do they top it? Martin Prezell, TVAM, Sydney.
The spectacle rolls on and on here at this great day in Sydney, celebrating Australia Day. And one of the penalties of attending an event like this, you might be pounced on by Paul Risen. Let's see what Paul's been up to now as he asks a few questions of the spectators in Sydney. Let's see what Paul's up to.
Well, thank you very much. We've found a nice cool spot in the shade here to join the Young family and their friends from Sydney who are having a picnic here overlooking Sydney Harbour. They got all the modern comforts, a TV set as you can see, an esky. We'll find out what's in that in a moment perhaps. And can we talk perhaps to Grandma Young?
Yes, Grandma Young's 87 years old and she's very happy to think she's lived to see this wonderful day on the harbour. and I've never seen such a magnificent sight in all my life. It's absolutely fantastic.
And I see you're enjoying a bit of Australian champagne there.
Yes, I've got some champagne to celebrate with, so I'm very pleased that we've had such a marvellous day too. To think that we've had so much rain, and to think it could turn out so lovely.
Are you proud to be an Australian today, madam?
I'm very proud. I've always been proud to be Australian, but never more so than today. It's wonderful to think that I think we've come a long way in 200 years, and I'm proud of us all.
What about you?
Yes, well, I became an Australian citizen only last year, and I'm very proud to be Australian and British. And Melanie and I wanted to say a very special hello to Neville and all the Searles in Worthing and our friends and relatives in London. Cheers.
Well, from the young family and their friends here overlooking the harbour, to Anne and Mike, cheers.
Cheers.
To you.
Mineral water. The tall ships are starting to amass in the harbour. We'll be bringing you a special report all about them in a few minutes' time. Right now, we've got to go back to London. Welcome back, and the tall ships are now parading through Sydney Harbour, and it's a beautiful sight.
Yes, to say that Sydney Harbour's really buzzing right now is an understatement. It's unthinkable, but 200 tall ships, one for every day of Australia's existence, if you like, or New Australia.
Yeah.
They're all going right through the harbour. Here?
It's one for every year.
Oh, here. Did I say here? Never mind. Now, look at that enormous ship. It's unthinkable that you could squeeze 200 of those in around the armada of small craft. Actually, many people have said there's too many small craft here. They're dominating the First Fleet, but they're certainly not dominating the tall ships.
And apart from anything else, one of the reasons for the parade of the tall ships is they're all going past HMAS Cook, which is where Prince Charles and Princess Diana, who wasn't going to stay for this ceremony, she's actually obviously loving it so much that she decided she would. They are on HMAS Cook, and they are watching the parade as it goes past.
In fact, the ship that you're watching right now had enormous problems getting right under the harbour bridge. I think there was a clearance of about 9 feet, but believe me, before they made the trip under the bridge, there were long, protracted negotiations. They didn't exactly use hand rulers to measure it, but I can tell you there were some stern words from overheated.
They had to wait for a low tide, didn't they? Look, they're even pumping out the water.
Let's straight away introduce you to the guests we have here, who have more than a passing knowledge of tall ships. With us is Holly Hollins, who's actually, and congratulations on this, sailed with an all-woman crew in the Hobart to Sydney race. Congratulations, you came 28th out of 150, wasn't it?
We did, that's right. We actually won third prize on corrected time in our class, which was a complete surprise when we went to the Opera House for prize giving yesterday.
Well, we'll come back to a women's triumph there. Let's also introduce Oliver.
Can I just say there's Princess Diana. With her hat off, she'll get sunstroke. She really is enjoying today. And no wonder when we look at it.
And as you were saying earlier, what's interesting about Princess Diana's presence is she wasn't officially going to be at this particular ceremony, was she?
In fact, well, if you remember, the last time she visited Australia, she fainted, and there was that big controversy about whether she was being worked too hard. And obviously they decided to try and keep her diary much lighter this time, but she has decided to come out and watch this.
Let me just, we rather rudely interrupted Oliver Pemberton, not because we don't love you, Oliver, but as you can see, things are buzzing all around us right now. Good morning to you. Now let's just look at, now you were particularly interested in the ship Asgard, weren't you, Holly?
Well,
Holly is actually focusing on Asgard, which is just passing the Sea Princess.
She's doing a great job representing Ireland, the Republic of Ireland back there. She was shipped out in a container, arrived here, and they're taking young people in, on courses.
There she is.
It's known as a small ship under a very large flag.
That's right, with a big heart.
Yes. Now, basically, what is it actually like to be on these tall ships? Is it strictly hard work throughout 24 hours a day?
Plenty of hard work. It's not quite like a holiday, but the youngsters are given so much to do, and a real reason for doing it, because they're taking part in the crew, they're helping to run the ship, sail the ship, steer her, they're manning the rigging on this one.
I was going to say, you actually need all those people to actually do the work, don't you?
Yes, you do, and you need a lot of crew, because you've got a lot of sails to handle, but if you're looking at the yards at the moment, these are the yards where the square sails are, and the men are standing on foot ropes. Men and women on Asgard and men on Nippon Maru are standing on the foot ropes underneath the yard, so that's where they can stow the sails.
Dangerous stuff, isn't it? That ship, sorry, Mike.
They have harnesses.
I was just going to, that ship we saw there was a square-rigged ship.
Yes.
That literally means that when the sail is fully out, it makes the shape of a square.
Well, yeah, they're square sails, and they go at right angles across the line of the ship.
Yeah. Whereas that one we're looking at...
That's a square rigger.
Oh, it is
Yes.
it?
Where the sails are.
I think everybody...
square rig sail.
Like
Fore
an
and aft
escalator.
rig means they're in line with the line of the vessel.
Ah.
Square rig,
Like
square sails. Yes, that's Asgard is fore and aft rig.
Ah, I see.
But
think
it carries
everybody
the
who
square
watches
sails
the-
on the foremast.
Yeah.
At the moment, he's only got the fore and aft rig sails set, but the square sails are where they are on the yards, where they're manning the yards. The young people are standing on the ropes under the yards, which go across.
Yeah, I only understand Dutch in the
reason
bar
we're not seeing a lot of square
We needed
sails
the ship to go with
the
it.
wind, unfortunately, is blowing towards them.
Ah,
Makes it very difficult for a square rigger to put
Look
his
at
sails
the
up.
here in this picture, actually on the rigging.
As you see those pictures, Holly, would you, if you took away all the buildings behind, would you see roughly those pictures 200 years ago? Is it an approximation?
Well, Asgard, the Nippermaru is much bigger than the ships that we saw or would have been coming.
And Asgard's very similar in size.
We saw the reenactment this
If they
morning.
wouldn't have been manning the yards when they came in, they'd have been working jolly hard to get the ship in.
The huge tall ships like this one wouldn't have been...
And they didn't
Oh,
have
no, no.
in the first. No, they were much smaller vessels. You've got to remember they've got a lot of men on board, but they were much smaller.
They were about
ships.
100 feet, and some of these are over 300 feet long.
Just how dangerous is it up in those lofty riggings up there? It always looks terrifying.
If the wind is blowing, it can be jolly dangerous. I mean, they have got safety harnesses
But
today, but they wouldn't have done when the first fleet came.
No, and they were, I mean, nowadays they're trained, they take time before they go to the top, they practice going up and down the lower rigging, and they are trained how to work aloft.
We were mentioning earlier a woman's triumph, female triumph, coming so high and winning prizes in the race. Is your message really that any women watching this could actually do this with ease, or would it take years of training?
A lot of women do take part on tall ships now. The Eagle, which we saw going past a little earlier, from the US Coast Guard, she has women cadets on board, about 21 cadets, girls on board. And I was talking to the officers on board earlier, and they were saying they have no problems, they take part, they do all the work just as the boys do. And then on Asgard, there are girls, they go aloft, they work in the rigging, and they take part in just the same way. They didn't have any preferential treatment. And on Sabre, we had all-girl crew, we were changing sails, heaving up the anchor, doing all the work just as the boys would do. And our skipper, Major Cherry Lewis Taylor, was in control and did a marvellous job.
This much more like the romantic picture of the first fleet that I've been thinking about up till now, but this one too would probably be bigger than a first fleeter.
Oh, much
Yes,
bigger.
much
But you can see the square sails there now waiting to come down. If the wind were to change, they would have them down and they would fill them up.
As you see, that's what I was saying about the yards going across the vessel.